Mr. Delicious, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Thank you. My name is Stanley Terry, aka Mr. Delicieux, and I have a channel on YouTube called Your Way or Yahweh Tested by Fire, and our mandate is as stipulated in 2 Corinthians 10:5. We destroy every argument and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and bringing everything captive to the knowledge of God. I'm going to be addressing my 7-day cycle argument. I have a series called the Sabbath Challenge, where I demonstrate Jesus is God sovereign over all nations by the means of the 7-day cycle. So this is quite an exclusive argument to me, and I have yet to see anybody refute it. So I like to first of all give glory to God for this opportunity. I'd like to thank TJump for the hospitality, and I'll say, as I've done multiple times in the past, if Mr. TJump is able to refute my argument, I will become an atheist and become his servant. Thank you.
If you're my servant, can I ask for money? Will you give me money?
I will do whatever you want me to do.
Sounds good. All right. So I'm an atheist. I think there's no evidence for the existence of God. Tell me what you think there is. The title says proofs. Do you consider it proof or just evidence?
Proof. Demonstration of a demonstration. Since you're a philosopher, I'm going to try a different angle. I'm going to use a syllogism and see how you react to it. So first premise, if Jesus is God, and what I mean by God is the creator of the heavens and the earth, then he has to demonstrate his power over his creation. That's premise one. Premise two, if Jesus is the author of the 7-day cycle, and premise three, if he predicted the universal adoption of the 7-day cycle as a sign of his authority over all nations, and premise four, if all nations keep a 7-day cycle. Conclusion, Jesus is sovereign, and by extension, he is God. So that is my syllogism.
I think it could be better. So,
probably.
I think the way you should put it is probably saying, if Jesus is God, his commandments will be fulfilled. Jesus made a commandment that there will be a 7-day cycle. The world has adopted the 7-day cycle. Therefore, Jesus is God. Something like that.
Thank you very much, man. Thanks for the help.
Yeah. So what is your 7-day cycle argument? What is it about the 7-day cycle? So the first premise was, I don't want to go into the specifics of I got your point. So the argument itself doesn't make a difference. But what do you think about the 7-day cycle? Why is it evidence of God?
Basically, he's author. He makes exclusive claims to the 7-day week by the sign of the Sabbath, since the Sabbath is directly linked to the 7-day cycle. And he predicted its universal adoption as a sign or evidence of his authority over all nations. And since every nation adopts the 7-day cycle against their religious and cultural practices, by that we can see that he is sovereign, and by extension, he is God. Since he has shown.
If not every society adopted the 7-day cycle, that would disprove your argument.
If there's one country in this world that doesn't adopt the 7-day cycle, I will become an atheist.
Okay. Well, the Javanese people have a 5-day week.
Okay. Where's that?
I Google it for you. Javanese people. And there's another one, which is the.
How about you give one? All you need is one. One.
Looking up the location right now, and give another one.
Indonesia.
The Javanese people is approximately 100 million people who are located in Southeast Asia and Indonesia.
Yeah. Exactly, and Indonesia has a civic calendar that's 7 day. That's a 7-day. So by extension, since Indonesia is sovereign over every citizen of that nation, by extension. The Javanese are also submitted to Jesus Christ, because Jesus submitted all nations, and the nations is sovereign over the people. So by extension,
they are not under a 7-day week. That is not the case.
The nation
is. The fact that if Indonesia adopts a 7-day week, but these people don't, and these people are not subject to the 7-day week.
Maybe I didn't make myself clear. Jesus came to submit all nations. So as long as he's sovereign over the nations, he's sovereign over the people who are citizens of that nation. So
Your argument was that they were subject to a 7-day week, which was false. They are not.
no, I didn't say that. You're isolating things and misrepresenting my argument, because I made it clear that he came to submit nations. So the fact that he submitted nations, every country, every citizen who adopts, every nation that adopts a 7-day cycle, it trickles down to the citizens, and every citizen is
Well,
therefore.
that's the part that's false. So it does not trickle down to the citizens, and I just proved that the Japanese people don't have a 7-day week.
Are the Japanese people under the sovereignty of their nation?
I don't think so. I think they're independent. Why?
Okay, let's say for sake of argument, they have self-autonomy. They're still under the jurisdiction of that nation, right?
No, not for the 7-day week. No.
No. I'm not asking about 7-day week. I'm talking about in general. Are they subject, or are they under rule of that nation?
Not necessarily. No.
Can you give me an example?
Well, there are many people
besides the 7-day cycle.
The 7-day cycle, there are many people groups who exist in a country but are independent of the laws of that country. That's the thing that happens all the time.
Again, I like to restate my original position
about the 7-day cycle. They are not a part of the 7-day cycle. That proves your argument.
Let's leave the 7-day cycle for a second. I just want to see where you're coming from, the angle you're trying to pursue here.
Native Americans in America are not.
That's another example.
Laws.
That's another self-autonomy.
This isn't about the 7-day cycle. This is about, is a group of people in a country subject to that country? No. There are groups in countries that are not subject to the rules of the country. And one example is the 7-day cycle for the Japanese people, which was exactly what your claim was, which is false.
Okay, so whether
or not they obey other laws doesn't make a difference. They don't obey the 7-day cycle.
I'm trying to go in general here. Are you suggesting, and I want to make sure I understand your position, are you suggesting because a people or tribe have self-autonomy, they're no longer under the jurisdiction of that nation?
If the nation gives them self-autonomy, that's literally what it means legally.
Can you put on the screen, self-autonomy means you're no longer under the jurisdiction of that nation? Because I don't know anybody that would agree with you. That is something you're really reaching right now, because self-autonomy does not necessitate you're no longer under the jurisdiction of that nation. That's
list
totally
of
foolish.
Autonomous areas by country.
I'm sorry?
This is the legal term, autonomous areas. Autonomous areas are areas that are in a country that aren't subject to the rules of the country. Countries
what do you get in that?
Areas are often federacies. The autonomous areas differ from federal unit to independent states in the sense that they, in relation to the majority of the subnational territories of some country, especially in the special status, including some legislative powers within the state, for a detailed list of federal states, including federal state link. List of autonomous areas by country, Wikipedia.
Okay, so I didn't hear anything about in your quotation, your citation, that suggests that they're not under the jurisdiction of...
You asked for a list of autonomous areas. I literally gave you the definition of autonomous area. Autonomous means not under the legal bindings of the country. That's what it means.
You said that the what you just cited said
I just proved you wrong. Move on.
Wait. I want to.
No,
maybe I didn't hear properly.
Yourself.
Okay, so you're more agitated with me than you are usually.
I'm not going to tell you the definition again. I've told you the definition. You were incorrect.
So the definition says that not under the jurisdiction of that nation.
Literally what it means. I just
read
it on Wikipedia. Go check it yourself.
Yeah, no problem. I'll check it out right now.
An autonomous area is defined as an area of a country that has a degree of autonomy or freedom from external authority.
A degree now. Oh, so you went from being no jurisdiction to a degree. So yes, you're switching your stance now.
Which means there are some things they do not obey the laws of that country for. The degree can be zero. Any degree between 0 and 100% is a degree.
Okay, so did I disagree with that? I said self-autonomy.
Yes.
You have your rules.
I proved you wrong.
You didn't say degree. You didn't say degree. So I'm going to read the list of autonomous areas.
100% is a degree, moron.
100% no, thank you. Areas, autonomous area is defined as an area of a country, so within the jurisdiction, that has a degree of autonomy.
Is an area, you moron. It's not under jurisdiction. A country is a location. Being in a country does not mean you're under the jurisdiction of that country. It's a location.
Okay, so how about that? I'll help you out right now. Give me the civic
How
calendar
about you
of.
try not to, because I'm smarter.
Okay. Give me the civic calendar for the Japanese.
The civic calendar? I don't know.
Yeah, do you know what you know the definition of? Because you seem to know definitions.
There's no
What
such
is a
thing
civic?
as a civic calendar. A calendar.
There's
is
no
of
such
5
thing as
people.
civic calendar. How about you
No.
Google search that on Wikipedia as well?
Okay, very simply, a civic calendar is not a thing.
I'll read it for you if you're unable to do it for yourself.
Just Google it. Civic calendar. Nothing comes up. There are no definitions.
Civil calendar.
Here's Wikipedia. The civil calendar is a calendar or possibly one of several calendars used by a country for civil, official, or administrative purposes.
Okay, so that goes against what you just
No, the Japanese
stipulated.
people has a 5-day civil calendar.
Show me. Okay, if you show me that the Japanese have a civil calendar that's 5 days, I will become an atheist right now. Show it to me. Because you could go to Wikipedia and it says that as well. Because it doesn't say it's a civil calendar, Mr. TJump.
Yeah, it does.
You were a little too agitated.
It literally says that. It literally says that. So
show.
Japanese,
Okay, go ahead.
Japanese courts.
Show
Japanese
me says
court
civil calendar.
5 days. Japanese court calendar, 5 days. Japanese
civil.
Idiot. What was the definition of a civil calendar? Is anything used in a court? Legal proceedings.
Civil calendar is a calendar or possibly of several calendars used within a country for civil, official, and administrative purposes.
Like
a civil calendar is almost always used for general purposes for people and private organization. Now, show me that.
Idiot!
The
I
Japanese,
just did that, you dumbass. A court is that. What you just read.
I'm gonna go to Japanese calendar. I'm gonna go and read Japanese calendar, and I'm gonna tell you what it reads because it doesn't say.
Japanese calendar is the calendar.
Okay, Japanese calendar is a calendar of the Japanese people. It is used currently with other calendars. Gregorian calendar. Wait. Let's go. Why is this here? Okay, yeah. So the Gregorian calendar and the Islamic calendar, both of those calendars are 7-day weeks. The Gregorian calendar is. Wait. The Gregorian calendar is the. Wait.
You're muted. Dumbass, you're muted. Dumbass. Those calendars are not used by the Japanese people. Those calendars are used by other people.
I'm muted now?
Yes.
Okay. Let me continue reading, Mr. TJump. And
Idiot, I can read it for you. I'll just mute you again. The Javanese calendar is used by the main ethnicities of Java Island. That is the Javanese, Murderese, and Sundanese people, primarily a cultural iconic identifier as the maintained traditional of antiquity. The Javanese calendar is used for cultural and spiritual purposes. There you go. You're done. You're done.
Is the official calendar.
You're muted. You're done.
Okay.
Next argument.
No. Hey.
You lost. I proved you wrong.
Hey, you didn't hear what I just said?
I proved you wrong. You're done.
You didn't read the rest of the passage.
I did. I read the whole thing. I proved you wrong.
No, you didn't. I'm gonna read
You're
it.
Done. You're done. Muted. I'm just gonna mute you every time until you move on. Next argument.
No problem. Hey, if this is what you want, I already won the debate.
No, you
didn't finish reading. I won the debate. It says it's the official
subject to the 7-day calendar.
Official calendar of the Republic of Indonesia.
You're muted again. I don't care. The Javanese people don't use a 7-day cycle. You lose.
And this is
muted. Move on. Like, let's move on to a different culture.
I won.
So I proved you wrong once. I'll prove you
I won. You're a certified retard. You're
muted. In Bogoland, Nigeria, a 4-day week is used as the civic calendar of Nigeria. Pwned, dumbass. Lost again. Next. Do you have anything else? Because you're just still muted. Yeah, you got anything else? You're done. Do you have anything else? No.
I'm muted. I'm muted, Mr. You're in panic mode. You don't even know how to read. The Gregorian calendar.
So you got debunked.
No, you're panic.
Stop. You're muted. Anytime you try to refute me on this, I'm just going to mute you because we've already done on this topic. Next.
You lost the debate.
Next. Yeah, I just didn't unmute you because there's nothing of value for you to say.
I know
there. So, yeah, I proved you wrong. There are multiple cultures that have non-7-day cycles. Your argument is debunked. Do you have anything else? Any other arguments that
you're
aren't debunked?
panicking.
Do you have any other arguments?
You're panicking.
Do you have any other arguments?
You're panicking.
That's not an argument.
You're panicking because you don't even know.
Muted. All right. So I've provided you cultures that don't use a 7-day cycle. You've lost. Do you have any other arguments?
You're panicking.
Okay. Bye-bye. Good night. All right. I'm bored. Yeah, 7-day cycle stuff is dumb. So provided there are multiple cultures that don't have 7-day cycles, he's wrong. Anybody else want to call in? Call in show? Call in show time. I'll pull up Whereby and the Discord if anybody wants to hop in, bring some arguments, evidence, things to talk about. Anything's fine. I know people requested a call-in show last time. I got a ton of windows open. I don't know why I have all these windows open. How's it going? Not much. One sec. Let me share screen. Share screen. All right. We are live. How's it going?
Good, man. How about yourself?
Pretty good.
Oh, hold on. Let me meet you on the YouTube.
Had a long day of donations. I've been doing lots of plasma and stool donations. It makes pretty good money, actually.
Of what donations?
Plasma, like blood plasma, and stool, like poop. Poop donations are great.
Oh, like for fecal transplants and stuff?
Yeah, like C. difficile, the thing where people don't have the correct bacteria to process food, and so they die, so they need transplants.
Right. Okay. Nice.
How about you? How was your day?
It was good, man. Just kind of normal Tuesday, I guess. Just work and usual kind of stuff. Working 9 to 5. So
Nice.
I was kind of curious. I watched, or I was in the channel, I guess, of the Darth Dawkins debate they had, or I don't know if you can call it a debate, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like, well, I actually have two questions. So when you are kind of prepping for these debates, like what's kind of your, I guess, process? And then when you have to deal with someone like Darth Dawkins or someone that's going to be very obtuse, I guess is a nice way of saying it. Like, how do you kind of prep for that kind of stuff? Is it like just
Well, the Darth
groundwork, or-
Dawkins one, I mean, obviously he was going to mute me in like 5 seconds, so I didn't really have to do much prepping for that one. And somebody just
Oh,
paid me, was like, jump into his live stream. I'll pay you $50. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. So I wasn't really expecting much for that one. Didn't have to do much prep work. The only ones I really prep for are the ones that are like huge academic types. Like I have a conversation with Michael Behe coming up, and I'm doing more prep for that one.
okay. So what does that prep work look like?
Watching videos of like him being debunked, his best arguments, and then the people doing counter arguments to those arguments, and usually the best ones, like Professor Dave or whatever, to go through the ones that are really long, usually like the 3-hour ones that go through all of his books and all of his major claims. Those are usually the best way to do it. Watching his previous debates to see the arguments he made in those debates, those are the best ways to get an idea of what he's going to say in this context to know how to counter it.
Okay, gotcha. So it's a lot of just kind of like researching the individual that you're going to be debating, not necessarily like a lot of the topics or the topic itself that you're debating.
Yeah, the topic itself is too general because many people have different approaches to the topic. And so researching the topic alone would not necessarily give you a good representation of what the person is going to say. And so researching the person in particular will give you a much clearer idea of what kind of arguments are going to bring up and what your best chance of finding counters for those arguments are. Whereas if you're just researching the topic, there's lots of different approaches that you could potentially anticipate, and they may have nothing to do with what the person's going to bring up.
Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, like it's more about finding the approach that they take to the individual topic than the actual topic itself that you're trying to counter.
Yep.
Okay, fair enough. Well, shit, man, I'm in agreement with you. Like, I don't really believe in God. Like, I don't have any specific, reason for believing in God. But I am kind of curious, like, on your version of morality. I was actually kind of curious about this because it seems like your version of morality depends on the inhibition of one's will. Like that's inherently immoral. Is that
Yeah, that's like
a
the
fair
definition of the principle.
right? So I guess my kind of question to you is, can someone have conflicting, like diametrically opposed wills at the same time?
Sort of. You can have conflicting desires. I don't think you can necessarily have one idea in your head that is contradictory to another idea exactly. Maybe like a logical contradiction.
Well, so let me kind of give you the reason why I am asking this question, because one of the things that kind of prompted this question was this. There's a procedure that you can do when you have like a very serious seizure disorder or epilepsy disorder, or whatever, where you actually split the hemispheres of the brain.
And you cut the corpus callosum.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But one thing that there's a side effect of that, which is, your body can do things that you weren't intending to do. So if I had the example of like, I don't want to raise my right arm, but my right arm just raises because the two sides are not talking to each other. That seems like sort of a conflict of will in a sense.
Well, that wouldn't be a conflict of will. If you don't want to raise your right hand and it raises, that would be a violation of your will. That would be immoral. So it'd be no different than like a seizure or something. But if you're thinking like there's two, in the cases where you sever the corpus callosum, there's two consciousnesses in the brain, essentially one of each hemisphere, that are independent. And those can have conflicting desires. But in my model of morality, they'd both be able to go off and have their own universe independently. So they wouldn't be connected to one another. But can a single consciousness have conflicting desires exactly at the same time? I don't think so. Or conflicting choices.
But I mean, in my example, is there two consciousnesses? It seems like the identity itself would be the same being, so to speak.
In this corpus callosum case, no, there's literally two consciousnesses. There's two things in the brain. Like the modern theory of consciousness is that there's actually lots of different conscious ideas floating around in your head, but only a certain amount get a higher level of electrical activity to actually become the conscious idea that you're having at this moment. And so in the case of the corpus callosum, potentially there are two consciousnesses. If there's only one consciousness and the other things are just not being risen to the surface, then there wouldn't be a conflict, because you'd still only have a single conscious with a single overriding desire. And so in order for your argument to like apply to my morality, you'd have to have a single consciousness with multiple intervening, conflicting choices.
But that seems to me like what is happening is a single individual, even though there's multiple states of consciousness happening within that individual, having conflicting wills, I guess is.
Well, an individual is
conflicting
a
desires.
instance of consciousness. It's not a body. The body doesn't matter. The brain doesn't matter. It's the consciousness as the individual. And so if there's a single consciousness, then that would be a problem. But in those cases, there is not a single consciousness. There's multiple.
Okay, so it's really not okay. So the individual is like the experience of a specific consciousness.
Yes. Quality experience, the what it's like to be someone.
Sure. Okay.
So it'd be like there's what it's like to be the right hemisphere, and there's a what it's like to be the left hemisphere. So there's two different consciousnesses.
Okay.
Because the example V.S. Ramachandran uses for the ones he uses, that one side of the brain patient was a religious person and one side was an atheist.
Oh, interesting.
He brought that up and was asking, like, so which does one hemisphere go to the heaven and one hemisphere go to hell?
Yeah, one goes to that's interesting. Okay. So in your model, like you're literally saying there's two consciousnesses within one individual or one person, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you sever the corpus callosum.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Well, I'll be honest, that was shit, man. You kind of answered my question really quickly. So, how's your Instagram girlfriend thing going?
Well, I have gotten back together with her a few months ago. So I'm going to bring her on my cruise to the Black Non-Believers thing, which is interesting, really cool.
Yeah, I saw that on your calendar. What is that? Black Non-Believers?
Yep, it's a group out of Atlanta, Georgia, predominantly African American, who are atheist African Americans, and they do this cruise every year. And I'm one of the speakers, along with Dragnot and some other people.
Oh, okay, cool.
Mandisa Thomas, I think, is the president of it.
Oh, sweet. Sorry, totally random, but this actually brought up another thing that I wanted to ask you about. So you had mentioned Matt Walsh's sort of like "What is a Woman" documentary a while back.
It is a very good. It was very well done. He did a good job with that. It's very interesting.
For production-wise, sure, it's not bad.
Well, I think one of it's his argumentation strategy was extremely effective. Well, like he wasn't like
extremely effective towards like idiot college liberals who don't have like solid arguments in place. You know,
I don't think so. I remember watching like the argument there is to say, can the experts in the field give a coherent definition of woman? And he just asked them and let them talk, say whatever they wanted, go for however long they wanted. And if from the perspective of somebody considering who has the more rational position in a debate, one side being unable to give a coherent definition of woman, which for the vast majority of people is very, very easy, makes that position look very bad. And so the way he asked the question, how simple it was to understand, the simplicity and efficiency of his argument, and the relatability to the vast majority of people, and the fact that he didn't like argue or yell and just let them say whatever they wanted and they couldn't address it. The way, from a debater standpoint, he presented the argument in the best way you could possibly hope to present an argument.
Well, I guess my thing was the question itself of what is a woman is sort of a silly question to me, because
Why is that?
because it's a question that could be right depending on what answer you give. Like it has multiple definitions that could be correct, it sounds like. So for example, if I were to ask you like, what is a pool? Like just a very generic, like what's a pool? You could give the answer of like, well, it's a swimming pool, it's a gambling pool, or maybe it's the game pool, right? But like each definition would be different depending on who you ask, or more specifically, what the context is in which you're asking the question. So when you say what is a woman, to me it seems valid to be like, well, what do you mean? Are you talking like strictly biological? Or are you talking more of like a gender construct? Which I know there's arguments to say that like, well, gender is determined biologically, so it's also biological.
Well, I think that's a fair criticism, but I think that if any one of the people he was talking to could say, in this context, I define it like this, and just gave a coherent definition, that would have been fine, but none of them could. So you can say
there was one person I felt like had a pretty good, I can't remember who it was, but her name, but it was a woman that kind of like gave like a pretty decent, like a pretty decent definition that he spent like a short amount of time on. I don't remember who it. I'll have to go back.
What the definition was.
So she kind of, I think she brought up like, well, okay, she kind of brought up the differences between sex and gender, essentially, from what I saw, and how they're developed. So sex is generally developed somewhat differently than how gender is developed, or determined. So gender is more of a neurochemical process, whereas sex is a, genetic, biological, it's not biological, they're both biological, but more of a genetic process, right? But they're both determined through natural processes. And that was kind of it might not have even been in the documentary. It might have been a response like from Professor Dave or something. But I do remember seeing like that criticism of like, well, there is like,
well, it's still not giving you a definition. So the definition in that case would be like, there's some neurological state to which the word woman corresponds to of some kind. But I think you still need something more specific, because lots of things correspond to neurological states. So it would be like, in that case, you'd probably have to give a brain region or something to which parts of the brain this would correspond to, which would be very difficult because we don't know enough about the brain to do that. Now, obviously, I would agree that every psychological state is going to have some neurological correlate in the end. But when comparing that definition to saying that the word woman should refer to sex and not a psychological state, and you can give the biological sex definition, that definition seems much simpler, much more intuitive, much more aligned with how it's used in general. And so that still seems like he would win the debate on that context, even though I would agree that is a better definition than I think any of the ones I saw in the video. I still think that from a debate perspective, he's still going to win that argument, because the way that the word is used usually refers to biological sex, and it makes more sense, and it's more concise, and it's more intuitive. Every kind of criterion you could want from a philosophical argument about which definition is better, that one wins hands down. I think the one argument that the more left side has the advantage is the fact that from an academic standpoint and a psychological neurological standpoint, it is a much more complicated thing than the binary that we use colloquially. And in an academic context, you could say that it's not informative enough to be useful for the purposes of some kind of academic research or whatever. That's fine, but I don't think that's a valid criticism that he's wrong. So it's like there are many different distinctions between colloquial usages of words and academic usages of words. Universe, for example, or atom,
or
universe. Yeah, theory and facts. Yep. And the fact that society uses a word differently doesn't mean it's right or wrong. And in many of the cases, it's perfectly right to use it in the way society does. And so if we grant that argument, then we would just say both Matt Walsh is right and the left definition is right. They're just useful in different contexts. You couldn't say Matt Walsh's definition is wrong at that point, because it'd still be correct for the vast majority of people and the vast majority of time.
So, so it sounds like you could just fine, you could be just fine using the definition of either Matt Walsh or a different definition of that, maybe a bunch of other people use that maybe isn't the academic use, and everyone would still kind of know what you're talking about. Like, that is a woman, even though maybe that particular person doesn't present outwardly that they are a woman, but but we're using that definition and we kind of know what that term means. So, like, what's the harm in continuing to use that language? Because again, we continue to do that with the original example of like pools. Pools has like multiple definitions depending on how you use it, right? The context. So it seems like context plays a much bigger part in how we define words than how, you know what I mean? Like,
well, colloquial would be in context here. I'm not sure I'm following what your argument is there. I think, like, if you're asking like what would be the harm in changing the definition to the more leftist definition, I think that the usefulness of the word is lost at that point. So like right now we have uses for the words and communicating and understanding things. Like if I went to the South and said, help me meet a woman, or if I go to Tinder and say I want to meet women, I'm not talking about trans people. I'm not talking about people who identify as a woman. I'm talking about specifically Instagram models, as you know. And so if the majority usage of that word refers to biological sex in some regard, and we change the word, then the word becomes less meaningful. It has less utility. It's less useful for people. Like, language is less efficient. It's not as good of a usage in society because it doesn't mean anything to the vast majority of people if we're talking about some kind of a psychological state which is not well defined.
I would agree that it's not as well defined as like a psychological state, but I don't think that negates its utility. For example, like we use the word literally to mean not literally. It's still a perfectly valid word to use in normal conversation. Like, that doesn't mean that that word has no use anymore. Like, we still use it even when it's meant to be used for something completely opposite of what we're actually using it for.
Yeah, like, the usefulness is therefore defined by whether or not you can communicate the thing you're trying to communicate to the other person you're talking to. And in the case literally, yeah, we nobody cares if literally actually means literally. The goal is just to be like a increase of emphasis on something. And so
with that,
the problem is the word woman for most people on the planet does mean biological sex. The connotations and intention of the use of the word specifically refers to a biological function, not a psychological one. And so for the same reason we can use literally to not mean literally, but it still makes sense to people, the word woman, for it to make sense to people all around the world, the vast majority of people, would mean biological sex. Or having it mean biological sex would make you significantly more likely to accurately be able to communicate with another person than using this alternative definition.
I mean, I guess right now, because it's a fairly new topic or it's a fairly new way of thinking, just like 10 years ago, or maybe not 10 years ago, but like 50 years ago, for example, like I wasn't alive back then, but I assume people weren't using literally the way that we use literally now.
Sure.
In a sense, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, but your digital definitions do change over time. Yes.
Yeah, so it seems like context really does have more of an effect on how we determine the definitions of things than what is the actual written definition of, that we're going off of. So like,
right, I agree. Like, the dictionaries don't define things; it's how people use it, and the context of the word woman seems like vast majority of people use it in the biological sense. That may change in the future, but like, I really don't care about definitions, so I wouldn't care one way or the other. But I'd say it's wrong to say that the vast majority of people who use it to mean biological sex are evil or immoral or transphobic or whatever. They just use the word in the way that makes the most sense to them, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. They are totally fine to use the word in that way.
sure. Like, if that's, as long as, I mean, I guess I would say as long as there's no inherent like ill will in the language that they're using, like they're not trying to demean anyone or like make them feel down or bad or anything like that. If that's not their intent of their use of the language, then sure, I would agree with you. But it does seem like there are a lot of the times that it's being used is for the intent of like harm or like, like dead naming people, which is a way cooler term than what it's actually meaning. But
Well, so that part I think I disagree with, because I think the vast majority of people who use the word or say you're not a woman are not saying it with the intent of deriding the person or insulting them. It's just like they understand the word to mean biological sex pretty much exclusively, and so by their definition that person isn't a woman. So I think that most cases of someone saying you're not a woman aren't like just the Twitter mob being angry and yelling at people, which definitely is a thing. But most are just people who are everyday people who think the word woman refers to sex. And so therefore, I don't think you're a woman. And they're not being insulting with that. They're just being honest about their definition. I did want to, there's a super chat from Tim West. He asks, Tom, can you steelman the woke's attempt to define woman and make a coherent definition of woman? So the left definition of woman is simply a psychological state. Anybody who identifies as a woman or feels like they're a woman in a cultural context, I believe, would be the closest steelman. I don't know. What would you say? Is that close?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's more of a psychological state, a neurochemical process that you feel like a woman, I guess.
Yeah. I think Matt Walsh brings up a valid point here of what is it that you feel like? And that is essentially just a collection of things that you identify with as what biological sex women have tended towards or something. And so it's like color, shape, sounds, clothing, social status, those kinds of things. And it seems like the left definition of woman tends to be identifying with those set of social constructions that tends to be prevalent among biological women or something like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, isn't there I remember seeing a while ago that there is a study done that says, or that shows that I'll use biological men and biological women to mean sex in this particular case, but that shows that biological men and biological women tend to have different brain activity. Like their neurons fire a little bit differently. Like when you look at it on a,
Yep.
MRI or whatever.
Yep.
So, but there's also the same thing that men who identify as women, even though they are not biologically born as women, they tend to have a closer brain state towards biological women, even though they are born biologically men. So it seems like when we kind of use the leftist definition that you're talking about, that's actually more encompassing the actual experience of the person rather than the outward appearance. And I think that's a valuable thing to go off of rather than just outward appearance, so to speak.
Well, I think it's like prioritizing the psychological state of the individual over their biological state.
Which we know there are differences in both psychological and biological, right?
Sure. But like imagine if I took your brain out and put it into a biologically female body or whatever, and you asked, are you male or female? Like from your perspective, you're male, but from everybody else's perspective, you're female. And so if they're saying, I want to meet a female on a Tinder profile, they would mean you, regardless of your psychological state, because that's not really important to them. And so from a cultural context, the way the word is used, vast majority of it more refers to your biological state than your psychological state, because we can't know people's psychological state. We don't have a strong way to identify psychological states. And so we don't classify people by psychological states unless it's like something really bad, diseases or whatever. And so using psychological states as a way to label people is not very concrete because we can't know what they're thinking. And so it's not something that's very useful in society to try to label people by psychological states unless they're criminals or something. And so it's not a pragmatic way to apply language to something that's important. Or there's one usage of the word which can be used to accurately describe a large percentage of the population and differentiate it very clearly, whereas another word which can't and has a lot of gray area, and it's not, because it's a psychological state, we can't determine it very quickly or easily. And so the use of the word that is a more accurate way to differentiate the group that you're talking about seems to be a better usage of the word.
Well, so I don't necessarily totally disagree with you there, but I would say that, like, again, kind of bringing it back to the context, like, if you were to go to an emergency room and they ask, well, what's your sex? There's some very obvious reasons why they would be asking that. They probably don't really give a shit about what your gender is very much because they need to know how to treat you. And generally speaking, mental states aren't going to, sorry, I'm not an expert, but generally mental states aren't going to play a huge effect on, like, I don't know, if you're having a UTI or something, you
Yeah.
know, it's like, you know, so that makes sense to ask, what's your sex in the emergency room scenario? But if you were at a job, like at a corporation or something like that, and they ask, well, what do you identify as? It seems like they're clearly talking about what your gender is, right? Like what you feel like, essentially what your brain state is. So to me, it seems like there's different contexts that seem pretty obvious as to what the answer should really be. You know, like in the emergency room scenario, well, I'm a man, but I identify as a woman, if that were the case. Or if in the
Well, like
corporation
take the
scenario,
second case, like why would that be relevant? Like there's no
to
way to
address that.
verify what your particular psychological state is. And no one really cares for a job. It doesn't make a
Well,
difference. Whereas in
to
the
be
case of
addressed
like,
what you preferred as.
yeah, but that, so like thinking it from a capitalistic perspective, how does this benefit the corporation? Because they don't care what your psychological state is. They just do that to pretend to make you feel comfortable so they make money. But in the case of like a doctor's visit, they care because they need to know these things to be able to actually accurately make your body function again. In the case of a
Well,
job, what you psychologically identify as means nothing. They care not at all, as long as you're making the money. And so, in the case of asking for psychological states, it's just not a relevant topic to anything in making reality function, making society function. Whereas biological states are an incredibly important thing into making society function. So, I could know nothing about the psychological states of anybody, which I pretty much don't. I don't really know the psychological states of pretty much anybody, but we can still make a functional society. Um, but not knowing the biological states of anybody would cause significantly more challenges.
so I would actually argue that the second scenario, it's more important for the psychological state to be known rather than the actual like biological state to be known, because you're addressing that individual, and if you address that individual as like something that's just not what they identify as or not what they, you know, yeah, identify as essentially, then you would be subject to potential like lawsuits or HR things. So like I do think the corporations do care on some level. You're right, they care about the bottom line, but they that can affect the bottom line if you do it negatively to me. So like the different contexts seem like they have different utilities depending on how they're used.
But remember, for the vast majority of history, there were no lawsuits. You could call or rape or kill your employees, and there's nothing anybody could do about it. So there's
Right. We don't live in the
one.
vast majority of history we live in right now.
Well, that's what I mean is that the usefulness of the word woman to describe biological context was valuable throughout time, no matter what the legal standing was. Where the usefulness of knowing psychological states is very contingent on our current legal system, and it's hard to like prove something one way or the other in psychological states. It's not a good criterion to differentiating groups of people, whereas biological is pretty good. It's pretty easy to identify that one. Pine
So
Creek,
does it
what's
make
up?
more
Hey, good to see ya.
Good to see you too.
Yeah,
What, you're not bald? I thought you were bald because you had the logo for so long of the bald Pine Creek.
I spread some borscht on the top of my head,
Oh wow,
and it worked. Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Praise the Lord.
How are you doing? What
saw-
did you want to chat about?
Oh, I just saw that you. I thought you might need some comfort because you got defeated by Mr. Delicious. Are you okay? Do you need any?
No, I'm so hurt. I'm so hurt. He said that all societies are subject to a 7-day cycle, and I like pointed out there's a society that isn't. And then
How do you do that? How do you look a person in the eye and what did you call him? Idiot? And I wish I could do that. I sometimes do it, but very rarely.
It's therapeutic. It's very helpful. Like there's this thing, there's this research that was done on cursing and saying swear words. Like if you say the most virulent swear words, it actually like reduces the level of pain, both physical
I've
and
heard about
emotional.
that.
But it's hard for people to like do that, especially in public, because they feel this like social angst of saying bad words. You just gotta gotta jump in the pool of deep end, and just go for it. Just like stand out in the street and just start yelling at people.
My heart is so full of crap, and I can't swear, so I can't let it out, and it's just like I wish I could be more like you.
Yeah. I think that's why you went bald in the first place. It's that pent up stress.
Oh yeah, my goodness. Hi, some dog millionaire. I don't think I know you.
I'm not well known, so that would make sense.
Okay.
Well, you do actually look a lot like Matt Walsh. Apologies if that's an insulting.
I've actually been told that multiple times, so it's totally fine. I get that quite a bit. My brother, who's very conservative, he literally says, "Oh, you're the liberal Matt Walsh." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
You should like make a joke out of it, like start a YouTube channel where you just pretend to be Matt Walsh and then just do ironic videos like the Republican Jesus. Like that would be hilarious.
That would be good, yeah.
Oh, so you're a liberal?
Me? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Speaking, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Me too, dude. I'm sorry too.
Well, this is good. You got a conservative and a liberal on. That's very well-rounded of you, TJump.
Absolutely. And
where do you lie nowadays?
I'm centrist. I've always been a centrist. My position is I'm right and everybody else is wrong, and that has always been my position.
Am I on the right on this replay screen? Yeah, I think I am, right?
Yes.
Oh, this is perfect. This is perfect.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good.
I should be in the center then, so I should like move myself over there. There you go.
Oh, you're the center of my screen.
Yeah, I just moved over, so he's on the left now, and you're on the right.
So yeah, I heard you talking about what is a woman.
Yep.
And I guess the problem is with the biological definition, you can test it pretty decisively. With the other definition, you can't. It's all self-reporting, right?
Well, not exactly. So you can do like fMRIs and get some general impression, because there is differences in neurological structure and how it functions between men and women. And so it is.
But isn't that just a butch woman then? Like my sister's raised on a farm. She's a tomboy, and but she would still say she's a woman.
No, they would have. Your sister would likely have different like neurochemical processes going on.
Have they done the test though? Like a very masculine, like tomboy woman compared to a trans woman, can you tell a difference?
That's a good point. Like if the neurological difference between men and women are what you're using to define men and women, if someone was a very like tomboy-esque woman but still identified as a woman, they probably would not have significant differences in the neurological states with men, and therefore your criterion would be unable to distinguish
there you go
this category with those who I do identify.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, we should try it. We should run the test. We got to call somebody.
Yeah, get your sister into an fMRI machine.
Yeah, we should get a bunch of tomboy women. Why do we always pick on women, never
and a bunch of femboys?
Trans men. Like it's always women, right?
Well, he just mentioned femboys. I mean, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Boy bands are legitimate points to things to make fun of, like Japanese boy bands.
Get some biological men who dress well and keep their room nice and tidy, and compare them with women.
Let's get a bunch of K-pop dudes.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, I like that. That's a really good argument, Pine Creek. If your criterion is mental states and your mental state detector isn't accurate enough to distinguish between women who do lots of stuff that men do but still identify as women versus women who identify as men, then yeah, that criterion is less determinative than biology, chromosomes.
So I guess I would kind of ask, like, most of these tests, most of these tests that I've seen have taken place fairly recently, which also fairly recently women have sort of entered the workforce. So we don't really have data that dates back to before that. So wouldn't there be more women that kind of have similar brain states to men because they're entering into the workforce more en masse now? Like it seems like there's some sort of similarity there. Like they are gaining more autonomy, which generally speaking was more of a male trait in a sense.
Sure, the prevalence of autonomy may make women's mental states, which were in the past significantly more different than men's, closer to men's, but that would seem to be problematic for your argument because it seems like there's less of a difference now between men and women mental states, and that if that is the crux of your argument of how to identify a genuine difference between men and women, if the difference is diminishing, then that means that as a criterion of evidence is also diminishing.
Oh, sorry. I mean, we still see significant differences in the brain states when we look at them, even though women now have closer brain states to men than.
Are you
very
hypothesizing,
likely.
or are you stating that
I'm
as a claim?
totally hypothesizing.
Okay.
Totally hypothesizing. Yeah, totally fair. So women now would likely have closer brain states than they would have had, 100 years ago, because there's, more women doing more typically manly things.
Well, so you said like two things that seem to contradict, saying they're more similar in this way, but there's still differences or something. Therefore, these other differences are the relevant ones or something.
Well, I guess what I mean is like over time they becoming like the differences between men and women externally that we see. So like men typically do this type of job. Well, now we're seeing women enter the workforce and also do this type of job. Yet we still see significant differences in brain activity and brain structure. So I don't know if saying, well, if a woman just does more masculine things, that means that their brain activity is going to be closer to a man's.
But this is easily testable, right?
Do you have an FM? I mean, yeah, if I have an fMRI
so we just
machine,
test
I'll
it and
definitely do it. Yeah.
we can solve this problem. But if I was a betting man, and I am, because TJump knows that, and I play poker, I would bet that you wouldn't find. I don't cheat. I would bet that you on a brain scan you couldn't tell the difference between a butch woman and a trans woman.
That's a good hypothesis. We definitely should test it.
I'm willing to put $1,000 on it.
$1,000 grand?
$1,000 grand. That'd be $1 million. No, I'm not going to do that.
I'll put in $100. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll bet 100. Who do we call to run the experiment?
Matt Walsh. But if we did the experiment and you found out that the differences in men and women's brain states couldn't differentiate someone who was like a butch man and a trans woman, or a man and a butch woman, or whatever, or vice versa, would you consider that to be evidence against your hypothesis, or evidence that your definition as applied via neurological psychological states is a less stable definition?
Tom, that's an SE question. Be careful now. You're going to be labeled as an SEer.
So if the experiment comes back and we'll use the term, we'll use butch, lesbian, and just average dude like me, and our brain states were completely, you couldn't tell the difference at all. If that were the case, then I would say that that's probably good evidence that my hypothesis or my definition is probably incorrect or needs more work, at least.
Well, there still has to be one difference at least. There has to be like a neuron where someone who identifies as a woman, someone who does not identify as a woman. But I think the concern is that that's all it's going to end up boiling down to. The fundamental difference between trans women and butch women in this context, or trans women and effeminate men in this context, would simply be that one neuron that says I identify with women. And that seems to be a less fully encompassing usage of the word to have it refer to a specific neuron, whether that neuron is on or off, as opposed to like every cell in your body having XY chromosomes or something along those lines. And so when comparing the two definitions, one seems to have much more verifiable usage and pragmatic usage than the other.
You know what my pet peeve on all this is, and this is going to be very, very controversial. Are you ready, Tom?
I was thinking we get like, what's his name on, the guy who did you almost get canceled for having on? It was
Robert Price.
Robert Price, yeah. We should get Robert Price on here, get Matt Walsh on here, just make it an entire dumpster fire.
What I don't like about the whole trans issue is that either you here, I'm just going to general blanket statement. Either you do what I want you to do, or you say what I want you to say. And if you don't, someone's going to die.
Has
That
anyone
bothers
died
me.
because of that?
Well, no, that's sort of like the idea or the argument that I've heard a lot of people say, that you have to view certain people a certain way, say certain things that they want to have said, and if you don't, they might kill themselves. Now, how is that different than negotiating with a terrorist? That's the controversial part.
Well, terrorism tends to have a very specific definition that tends to lean towards like political stuff. This trans ideology, like they're saying, in your extreme example, they're saying like, I am going to kill myself. They're not planning on harming others.
I know, but noted. That's a difference, but it's still the same idea. Someone's going to die if you don't do what I want you to do.
I mean, I guess someone's going to die if you don't do what I want you to do, by calling me the correct name.
Okay.
I think he's asking like it's threats that you must do something under some coercion, that there's some consequence.
Well, I just don't see that happening. Like, I don't see threats or coercion happening if you don't call someone the right name. Like,
you don't see that happening? You don't ever hear people say that a good reason to call people by their proper pronoun is because if you don't, then they might commit suicide? You've never heard that?
Not specifically. I've heard things of like, well, I've heard of policies were saying like, hey, if you refer to someone as the incorrect pronoun or like incorrect name, then like that's grounds for firing you. Like, we can fire you for that reason.
But the whole idea of it causes increased depression, and that will cause people to might off themselves.
I mean, yeah, if you constantly bully someone, then yeah, like they're probably more likely to.
Okay, but that's the thing.
I don't know if that's a threat though.
But that's the thing.
Like, that's more of a result.
But the thing is, the definition of bullying, even like if someone is biological female and that person has a definition of what female means or woman means, let's say a woman is an adult female, and someone says, and that person refuses to say, oh, you're a woman, I'm going to call you a he, and they view that as bullying, and the other person just views it as fact based on their definitions, and they say, no, you got to do my definition, because if you don't, I will kill myself, or someone else might, commit suicide. How is that not a type of severe manipulative coercion?
Well, like I said, I don't really see that happening. What I see happening is people who are bullied basically called names that they don't want to be called.
If you did see that happen, would you say that that's manipulative coercion?
If someone is threatening to kill themselves, if you do one specific thing that they don't agree with, then like, yeah, that's kind of shitty of them to do. Like, I don't think anyone would really reasonably disagree with that, but that's not what's happening like widespread. That's not like a normal thing that I just don't see happening. It's normally like, hey, if you keep calling me the wrong pronoun or the wrong name or the wrong whatever, yeah, I'm going to go to HR and try and get you fired because you're being a dick. Like, if somebody kept saying Pine Creek, she is a YouTuber, and kept calling you as she, you would be totally in right to correct them and say, I'm actually a he, I'm actually a man. That's what I go by. Like, that's totally fine. That's not manipulation. That's like you standing your ground and saying,
but is it totally fine for me to have someone lose their career if they refuse to do it?
If you are breaking the rules of the position that you're in, and one of those rules is, hey, treat people with general respect and call them by the name that they're asking to be called, and you refuse to do that, then
but
yes,
is there any laws on the books that it's against the law to just be a crappy person?
There's not laws, but there's rules in corporations that say, hey, if you're, that's what HR is really there for.
Yeah, but why those rules exist at some corporations?
Why do those rules exist?
Yeah. Like, for example, you might be fired if you don't call someone by the proper pronoun. Why do you think that those rules at certain corporations exist?
Generally to protect like individual rights, I guess.
Is it a right to be called by the proper pronoun? Is that a right? given by society in the United States?
Well, it is sort
it
of a right
isn't.
to no. Well, it is sort of a right not to be fired for, like saying you identify as this thing. Like that's not a fireable offense.
But you just said it is in some cultures, in some corporations, I mean.
Corporations can have rules that say, no, you can't like dead name people, or you can't call people by the wrong pronouns. That's not okay in our company
Right.
culture.
And then I asked, well, why do these rules exist in corporations? And it's because people they just don't want shitty people.
Yeah, I'd say like generally speaking, a lot of corporations don't want shitty people working there.
I got a question for you. What if the reason that they call you a woman as a she as opposed to a he is because their culture, she and he refer to sex? It's not because they're being mean, not because they're trying to dead name you or to insult you, but in their culture, that's what the word means. And so they just don't agree with that usage of the word.
If there is a rule in that corporation, we'll just use, Corporation X. If the Corporation X has like a rule in their employee handbook that says you have to call people by the correct pronouns and by the correct names, if you don't, that's a fireable offense. Then, yeah, that's not a good thing for them to do. They should be fired because based off that company's policies.
Was it fine for a company to make policies that could discriminate against any culture? If we don't want you doing this, to say African Americans, we don't like you using the word in some kind of slang, and they do that. Is that good of a company to do to be derogatory for a particular?
Can you fire a black person for using the N-word at work?
Well, I'm not really saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that like that's how companies are. Right?
Well, sure,
like,
but the question here is more like, I think that companies shouldn't do that. They shouldn't fire people for using pronouns in a way that is based on sex rather than gender. In the same way that they shouldn't fire people for having an accent, like a Jersey accent. Like, it's their accent, that's their culture. You shouldn't like ban them for having a Jersey accent. Just writing it into policy doesn't make it right. And so what is the difference here between forcing people to use pronouns that are antithetical to their culture versus forcing someone to use language that's antithetical to their culture? So like in schools, they treat African American, I forget what the lingo is called, but those kinds of terminologies as lesser, and I don't think that's right. In the same way, I don't think it's right to discriminate against people who have a culture where gender and sex are synonymous.
So I would say like like using your example of like the New Jersey accent, like it would be totally unfair for someone to fire you because of your New Jersey accent. I would agree with that. Mostly because the New Jersey accent isn't going against someone else's personal beliefs, right? Like it's not, you having a New Jersey accent doesn't go against like your definition of what a woman or man is, right? Like it doesn't matter. Like it's just their New Jersey accent.
Well, let's say somebody was offended by my New Jersey accent. Let's say Pine Creek is racist against people from New Jersey, and he just hates them, and it just offends him greatly that I have a New Jersey accent. Am I now obligated to lose my accent and my culture because he's offended by it?
Well, no, because he's being racist. He's being a dick to you, right? Like you're not being a dick to anyone. You're just using your.
I got a better one, TJump. Okay, sorry for beating up on you here, but what's your first name? Your real first name?
Me or him?
You. I know Tom.
Oh,
if you don't have to share if you don't want. It's fine.
Sumner? Okay. Let's say you've got a workplace, 2 trans women work at this place. And let's say I refuse to call both of them by a she pronoun, and they want to be referred to as she, but I just don't. They're wearing beards, and I'm a pattern seeking mammal, and I just see beards and I say man, and it's just too much bother because I'm just a crappy person to make that extra effort. And guess what? One of the trans women just laughs it off and is not offended at all. The other trans woman is really offended and wants to get me fired. What is the difference between those 2 trans women? One that's offended and one that's not.
What's the difference?
Yeah. Why is one not offended? One is.
Well, Oh, well, I would say the difference is that one is offended and one isn't. As to their motivations as to why, I don't know. They're like, that's up to them.
See, but isn't this a problem though?
but-
Like, because you can have two trans women, one be offended by certain words coming out of a mouth and one not, then really isn't the responsibility on the offendee and not the offender?
Well, kind of, I guess.
There you
so,
go. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing though, is like, if I would kind of point it or turn it back around and say like, okay, well, if I said something about a particular religion and, let's say Mormons, for example, like I think Mormons are silly or whatever. And I work with a couple Mormons, one is totally fine with it, one is totally offended by it. Then it's like, well, the difference between the two doesn't really matter. What matters is one of them was offended. That actually did harm somebody. So it's like, if one is doing harm, if somebody's language is doing harm, then that seems to be regardless of the reasoning.
But you notice that phrase "doing harm" is only applicable to one of the trans women and not the other, right?
Yes.
So you got actually two factors here. One is to focus on the offender in quotes and saying, "Hey, please don't do that." The other is for the offendee to say, maybe you could get a little stronger and be like this other trans woman who's not bothered by it.
So are you saying that like people who find offense to things are just like weak? Because that's kind of like what it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah,
you're saying.
Yeah, I am saying that. Weaker than the one who isn't offended.
I wouldn't agree with that. I don't think that someone's offense to something necessarily defines their strength or weakness. Like, I think
well, in this particular area, yeah. Like, it's like physically, like if someone picks up a weight and it's like, oh, that hurts my arm, and the other person picks up the weight, no, it's easy. And well, how dare you give me this weight to pick up because it hurts? Well, maybe work out a little more, exercise, and you can get stronger and it won't hurt.
I don't know. I don't think the reason why it's wrong has anything to do with whether or not anybody's offended. I think like if somebody in your office is being aggressive, whether or not somebody's offended isn't the problem. The problem is the person being aggressive.
Well, no, but is it aggressive if nobody's offended?
Yes, it's their intention. So even if their intention is to harm or be aggressive, whether or not
people with their intention is not to harm.
That's the interesting part. That's the part that I think is important. So like, that's why I brought up the culture. If they're culturally, they just use the word in this way and they're not trying to be offensive, then I think it's wrong to fire them. If they're deliberately trying to hurt people, deliberately bullying people, whether or not they're successful, I think that's grounds to fire them. So if the context is that they're using the word or the wrong label specifically to be derogatory to a person, whether or not the person is offended doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. This is where I disagree with you, Tom, because the example I usually give is not on this issue, but with racism. Let's say I believe that Black people are inferior, and that's my intention. Like I truly believe.
Put that on TikTok right there.
Yeah, let's say I believe that, and my intent is if you view that statement, Black people are inferior, as bad and doing harm. But my actions are to help Black people because I feel sorry for them. So whenever I have a chance to help them, because I view them as inferior, I will help them. So now here's my question. Is my viewpoint bad in your opinion, Tom?
No, in that case, you're not intending to harm them. So I'd say it's not bad. You're wrong, but you wouldn't be bad. So if like the context of when it's wrong to fire someone is if they are doing something with the intent of harming someone else. So if you just think African Americans are inherently lesser or something, but you never say it, you never like say something to harm them, then no, you've done nothing wrong. So, or like if you're just,
but if your intent to harm, but this is the problem. If you intend to harm someone and you end up being bad at your intentions and you end up helping them, does it automatically turn on its head and say, oh, it's not bad?
No, it's still bad. So if your intent is to harm them, but you fail at it and you accidentally help them, your intent to harm them is still justification for. But
this sounds like Christianity to me, with just viewing a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. It's like you intended to like this lustful adultery type. It's like a thought crime.
No,
There
because
was
this
no
is
trial
this
for
is
your
the
crime, your
enactment.
fault?
It's having the desire and acting on it. So like if you
Okay.
attempt, say if I attempted to murder you, but accidentally gave you a winning lottery ticket and you won $1 billion,
Yeah.
like that's still
Is that good or
attempted
bad?
murder. It's just a failed attempted murder.
I know, but is it good or bad?
It's bad. I have attempted murder, so that is bad. But it's good that I gave you $1 million. So you're very happy about this. But I still did a bad thing because I intended to do an evil action, and that is the criterion of badness.
Okay, but that's a little different because your intention, like, depends what exactly you're doing. Like, my bottom line is that harm is about action and not about thoughts. Because I can't harm you, TJump, right now. If I think the most negative things about you right now,
Oh, that hurts. My heart. My
yeah,
heart
are
is
you
like,
hurting?
oh,
No.
it's so bad.
But if I actually do something now, then you're hurting. And so that gets to the point of like this whole idea of thought, crime, and intent. Yes, a lot of times our actions do follow from our intentions and our beliefs, but not always. In fact, many times they don't. Like there's many men in the United States who hate people and want to kill people, but they don't. There's many men in the United States who want to cheat on their wife, but they don't. So have they done anything wrong just by thinking these things?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But
Then we're on the same page.
If they have that thought and then that thought causes them to act in a way that they're attempting to maximize the impact on that person. So if they hate a black person and then they try to kill the black person, whether or not they succeed doesn't make a difference here. It's if they're just really bad at murdering and they accidentally help the person, they've still done something wrong here. They're still a threat. We should still probably do something about this person, even if they're just really bad.
Even if every action of that they do is like so bad, is so faulty that they end up every step of the way they're helping them.
Well, at that point, it's like we're like, okay, we should probably just let them go because they're doing good all the time. Like they're still a bad person, but since they're never going to do a bad thing.
So even though their intention in their brain is bad thoughts, every action they're doing because they fail so badly is good.
Yeah.
Then I would say they've done nothing wrong, even though their intention and their attempts, even their attempting, is not bad because they're failing so badly.
All right, so I would agree that if that such a person existed, it'd be fine to just let them go. Problem is that it's pretty easy for people to be rationally understand how to harm other people and not do only good things by accident. And because that's a much more likely outcome, we have a pragmatic justification for isolating them because it's going to be pretty easy for them to harm people if they're not isolated.
But now to tie this back to the trans woman thing, if you have a person who, like, in order for you to say that what that person did is actually bad, you have to get inside their intentions, their brain states, right?
Yes.
No, that's a tough thing to do.
Yes, it is very tough. That's why it's innocent until proven guilty.
Right. So
what about the opposite though? So what about the opposite? Like what if you intend to help somebody but actually end up harming them pretty bad? Right? Like, is that person bad or are they good all of a sudden?
It's the same thing. You don't know their brain state, so you just have to make a pragmatic judgment based on most instances of this occurring. Was it intended that they were helpful or harm?
Yeah, and that's why we have juries, and a lot of these things are very sticky. Like if people, there have been cases where people have tried to save someone's life and end up killing them, but their intent was to save their life. And I feel sorry for the jury members who have to adjudicate this because, you know, a lot of these people have gone to jail for manslaughter, even though their intent was to save their life.
Right. But my point is like, we were kind of measuring the harm on if they intended to do harm. But even though if the person intended to help and do good, but they ended up harming, that doesn't negate the consequences that actually came from it. So I would say that it's actually bad that they tried helping.
But the thing is, the problem is, getting back to this trans woman thing, and I want to try to keep the focus there, is that you got two things at play here: the offender and the offendee, and this exact same action, depending on the context, can offend some person and not the other. right?
Sure.
So now we got to get into the brain. Why is the exact same action bad in one case and good in another? Because of the brain state of the person who was offended versus the brain state of the person who wasn't. And that is so hard to prove. How do you prove these brain states? Like if someone was to say, if someone wasn't really that offended, but just had, this guy's a dick and I don't like him because of what he did 2 years ago, has nothing to do with the trans thing. And they say, oh, you didn't call me by the proper pronoun. I'm offended. I'm going to get you fired. That really, it has nothing to do. That's their brain state. And there'd be absolutely no way to show otherwise, because you're just taking them for their word at it that they're offended for being called the wrong pronoun. When really the issue is something else.
So if I were to call Caitlyn Jenner Bruce Jenner, if I were to dead name them, I just said, because Caitlyn Jenner ran over a couple people with her car, I just don't like her because she did this action. I would still be a dick for calling her the wrong name, even though I'm justified in saying she sucks as a person, right? Like that particular action of me saying, oh, you're not this identity is still kind of a dick move, even though like they are also kind of a dick themselves in some sense, like it's totally fair for you to call people out on doing bad things while also still maintaining the same level of respect that you would have for.
Yeah, but the whole thing about a dick move, like there's probably thousands of people on the planet who think I do dick moves every time I have Theist Thursdays, right? When I have Christians come on and I make
dozens, I'm sure,
and I make most of the Christians kind of look foolish. That's a dick move, Doug. Do you think I should be fired for having people look foolish about their Christianity on my show? Do you think I should be canceled? Or like if I worked for a corporation, would you think they should, oh man, Doug, you were real, how dare you ask those questions to those theists that make them look foolish? Like they really felt like offended.
If you were directly in opposition to that company's policies of, hey, don't be a dick to these particular group of people, then yes, you probably should be fired because you're not adhering to the rules.
Yeah, and that gets back to why are these rules being set in the first place? Because of some type of pressure of political correctness or whatever. Because I actually think in a way, and I'll say it very crudely, but in a way, being a dick is how we find out what's true. Galileo was probably viewed as a dick to many people of his time, but he was right. And so a lot of times when we're trying to figure out what is true and what is false, the arena of ideas, when someone says something that seems incredibly offensive, but they might be right. Like we can't set up these laws of, you need to be fired because you're being a dick right now. Well, what if that dick is right?
Well, yeah, definitely include like if you think someone's wrong and therefore you try to disprove their mathematical theorem and just own them and spend your life trying to destroy all of their work by making better work, no problem there. Probably totally fine. But if you're just like insulting them at workplaces or making their life harder in a non-productive way by calling them names or whatever for no benefit, not because of some culture you have just to harm them, that part I think is fireable. So if there's a construction to it where you're using your motivation to do something constructive, it's totally fine. If you're intending to harm them,
but it's all fuzzy though, right? Because like I said, that analogy I gave earlier, you can have two people hear the exact same sound waves hitting their ears from me, let's say. One can be offended, one not. So now we have this problem of, okay, is it the majority vote of, okay, this is offensive, this is being really dick? Like there's people who have a dry, witty humor, for example, who some people just view that type of humor as, oh, this is disgusting, this is crude. Other people say, hey, this is funny. Like, how do we adjudicate this? What is really a dick move and what is just people being overly sensitive?
Well, I'd look at the history of the individual and say, do they regularly do things that are specifically targeting a particular group or demographic? with a seemingly clear intent to harm them, or is it they just making jokes? And if they just do jokes and they're bad at jokes, then you can probably infer that. So if there's a clear and present history of like what they do, you can probably
Or not
infer-
even jokes, just that, like you said with the New Jersey, like I've talked to many people from New York, New Jersey. The way they talk is different than a lot of people in the United States, and a lot of people find it offensive because they're fast, to the point. They don't. Hi, how are you doing? It's a nice day. No, it's like boom, 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 boom. And some people might find that very offensive. It's like you're putting this pressure on me, and I can't take it in the workplace. And
Yeah, we can make a clear case. This is a cultural thing. It's very clear that this is a part of their culture, and you can't say that they're not intending to do anything wrong here. It's totally normal. And so I'd say the same thing would apply in this case, where we just look at the pattern of their life and see, is this something that's like them targeting a particular individual, or is it a part of their culture? And if it's a part of their culture, it's totally wrong to judge them for that. It would only be justified to fire them or to judge them if they're specifically targeting a group or demographic in some way, which seems clearly with the intent to harm.
so does that include Christians who you think are false about certain ideas?
Yeah. I would treat everyone in this way. So like
So
if we were comparing Christians or whatever, we could say the Bethlehem Baptist Church specifically targets certain minorities over others, whereas most Christians don't. And so we can say, well, of the Bethlehem Baptist Church, they have this one particular kind of vent to them that isn't probably.
No, I mean atheists targeting Christians.
Yeah, same thing.
And not anybody else.
Yeah, so like if there were atheists who were deliberately making fun of Christians in the workplace and saying, "Ha, your God drowned babies," ha, and that's every day. Yes, you could fire them 100%.
Okay, but outside the workplace, you can do it all you want.
Absolutely, freedom of speech.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say. It's
Well,
definitely...
nowadays, even the whole workplace idea is kind of crumbling. Like, what is a workplace? And like people work from home, and it's like.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a problem where corporations are firing you for what you did in your free time. That one I think is bad. I don't think that should happen.
I'm just glad I don't have to work for any corporation.
All right, well, I got like 6 minutes left because I don't have the paid whereby.
Oh, you got to pay that, man.
Well, I normally don't use this. I usually use Restream. It's just, it has a longer call-in link.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, I was going to say to your question about the cultural, if it was culturally with them or within that person's culture to use biological pronouns versus, gender affirming pronouns, let's say, if that person is in an environment or in a corporation where the majority of people are in opposition to that, then I would say, yes, it's probably like okay to fire them because they don't meet the standard criteria of what most people in that corporation are going off of, which I know isn't a great answer. And that's not what you really want to work in any corporation, like the vast majority of the people.
Well, no, I'd ask a more specific question. What if it was African-American vernacular? What if the majority of people in the workplace didn't like African-American vernacular? This person used African-American vernacular. Is it totally fine for them to fire him?
Well, that would be a protected class.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that the culture here should also be a protected class. Their cultural usage of
African-American is a protected class?
Yes. Yes.
Race is a culture. Well,
no,
race is a
isn't.
protected class. Race
Well,
is
African-American is not a protected class.
It totally is. In the legal world, you can't discriminate against skin color, race, demographics.
African-American and skin color are two different things.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
In English, the word African-American is used synonymous with race, just like the word woman is used synonymous with sex. And so you're being a hypocrite.
Nope. You can be black without being African-American. True or false? Gotcha, Tom. Gotcha.
False.
What?
False.
You can be, you're saying you can't be black without being African-American?
I think so. I think African-American just means your heritage is from Africans who were in that culture.
No, my question is, can you be black without being African-American?
Oh, like African is also black? Yes.
So you can be black without being African-American. They're not synonymous.
Or are you asking if there can be white African Americans?
I'm just
That's
asking
what I
a
was
very
wondering.
general question. Can you be black skinned and not African American? The answer is
Sure.
obviously yes.
Sure.
So black and African American are not synonymous.
Sure. but
Therefore, African American is not a protected class. A certain race is, but not being African American.
black is not the only race. African American is considered a sort of race, and so it is a protected class.
Sort of race?
Sort of race. Yep. Races
Can you
aren't
be
real.
white and African American?
Possibly.
Yeah, see, it all falls apart.
Well, yeah, because race isn't like a real thing unless you're talking about ecoclines. And
Yeah, and
ecoclines,
how black do you have to be? What percentage of your family tree has to be African American for you to be African American? Like it just all
it's
becomes
still a
mess.
protected class. African American is a
Yeah.
protected class.
It's
Not
a
on the
race. It's a
books.
protected class.
Races are, but not African American.
Typically, African American is used as
Because
a
you
race in
because you
America.
can be black and be African. You can be black, be from the Caribbean descent. You can be black. You could have so many different.
So let's say
what
I
is
fired
black?
you because you're an African American. Would you be able to sue me? I didn't fire you because you're black.
Pragmatically,
just because I
pragmatic-
fired you because you're an African American.
actually, I would love to see that go to court. Pragmatically, yeah, you're right. They probably win the case. But I would love to see someone give that argument I just made and say, no, I didn't fire him because he was black. I fired him because he was African American. I would love to see that go to court and being battled, because it wouldn't be a no-brainer. Because my wife is black, but she's not African American.
I think that would be a one-way trip to jail. A very quick one.
Well, yeah, in the United States, yeah.
But I got like 1 minute left. Thanks guys for coming on. I'm gonna head out and I'll talk to you guys later.